earliest art potters, or the first art potters really. This is a very significant exhibition, and I don't think you'll see the importance of any of these pieces anywhere else together again. There's not many pieces here, but people like Sturrock, there's only a few pieces known. I think Berry in the 70s, when he first bought some, there was a cache of about 35 pieces, and really we've only added that by about one piece since then. I would have hoped that more pieces would have appeared over the years, but they haven't. That probably just reinforces the nature that Sturrock was. I think he really only made it for his own consumption, perhaps family and friends. He never seems to have sold things. You certainly don't see his work, in exhibitions in the 1890s or even things for sale in newspapers. So he was quite different to the other two potters that we want to talk about. One of the main considerations here is talking about what terms mean. And just the term art pottery, people have different ideas. So I think really that it's a potter that's conceived his work, he's made it, he's glazed it, he's even designed or made a kiln, and then he's sold it. Would that be what you consider to be an art potter? If he conceived the thing, if he made it, if he actually glazed it, made or designed the kiln, and followed it himself.
All one of the pieces that you took an idea and put it into position, and one piece was made, not 100,000 ones.
Right.
And then write a couple of 4 or 8 pages of crap to go with it. With on artists.
Well, this exhibition is about 3 potters. It's 2 brothers, Graham and Ferry, and Richard Sturrock. Graham Ferry we can talk about mostly over here on this wall. I don't have any of these things bar one which have survived, or I know where they are today. He was very much a sculptor. His previous history was in the Linthorpe art pottery in England. Of course, that's the pottery works that was started by Christopher Dresser, who was really sort of the preeminent designer of the 19th century in Western culture, if you like. So Dresser was over there at Linthorpe. Graham Ferry was one of the models. So he did original modelling depending on what he was directed to do by Christopher Dresser. That pottery works closed 1879. He came out to Melbourne in about 83. He worked for this bloke here, Alfred Cornwall. Alfred Cornwall had a large pottery works in Brunswick, and his works really is divided into 2 halves, like pipes and domestic pottery, and on the other side of the railway line is his terracotta works. And Graham Ferry, where before Linthorpe started, there was another pottery works which was a terracotta works. So I think even though Graham Ferry was technically trained as an architect, which we don't know if he ever actually did, he's gone from making terracotta to Linthorpe art pottery, then he's come to Alfred Cornwall's works, and Cornwall employed him really just making portraiture busts. So this was made at Cornwall's works, so was this figure of Oliver Twist. Oliver Twist virtually toured the world at most of the major exhibitions in London, Calcutta, the 2 big exhibitions in Melbourne as well. So it's been a well-travelled item. These other 2 are pieces of people in Ferry's family. I forget who they are. One's a sister and one's a nephew. Now, as I mentioned, part of Cornwall's works was the terracotta works. So if you have a look at this, you get an idea. This is probably where Ferry was involved initially, doing a lot of the grotesques and the more decorative works on the tops of the rooftops, even down to sort of the more mundane things like the tiles that were under that. So that's how he's connected in with Cornwall. He then left Cornwall and started a pottery works just opposite Cornwall's works, which he called the Brunswick Terracotta Works. And he started that purely to make decorative awnings, embellishments on buildings, harking back to his sort of architecture background. So there are many buildings in Melbourne in that sort of 1880s period that are decorated in terracotta, which are all Graham Ferry's works, which he designed back there. Whether it might be sort of corbelling or outlines of windows, arcades, even down to really decorative things like all sorts of grotesques and decorations on the building. That's an area that really hasn't even been explored yet as to what still exists of his work. Going back to these, this one still exists, I don't know where. This one's in sort of central Victoria. These 2 and a third one were all stolen from a garden of one of the Ferry's descendants. So luckily I'd seen these in the 1980s, photographed them, But then the next time I came back, they'd just been... So I'm sure the people don't understand the value of these things. It's just been like decoration in the garden. So unfortunately, that's just the sort of thing that's happened. Oh, I warned them about this because they had another piece there earlier which had been stolen from the main sort of porch of the house. Well, they did obviously just left them out in the garden and they disappeared. This piece here is the only piece that we have the actual pedestal, which is just over in the corner here, so we might as well go over there. Please just interrupt me if you want to say something or add to what I'm saying. This is the pedestal. It's signed Graham Ferry sculpture on the bottom. When the house was sold, the owner said that I could have this, so I was very gracious. So it's the only piece that I know that is still existing. The piece above it is also very interesting. To look at, you would think it's part of Graham Ferry's work. From the drawings over there or the pictures, you can understand that. It's Richard Sturrock's work. So my contention is that the two Ferry brothers and Richard Sturrock worked in a sort of a loose studio type environment. So they weren't just art potters as such, they were studio art potters. And this is something that really doesn't happen until Leach and people like that look like the 1920s. So what I think has happened is that Richard Sturrock was a mould maker. They made moulds out of plaster, and most of these other potters, they would reproduce their wares in plaster moulds. So I think there's at least two of these around. Right, so the same sort of idea that the Ferry brothers had. They'd make individual pieces of art, they would mould them, they could reproduce them and then sell them as well, almost still as one-off, not quite one-off pieces, but almost. So I think these two pieces have been probably come back together again after at least 100 years, but I'm sure they would have been done in the same studio, in Graham Ferry's studio in Brunswick. This time Sturrock would have been like a pupil, because I think as he was there helping make these items, he was so enthused by them that he also was sort of tutored by them and then would go away and make his own thing, probably in the same studio. So Oliver Twist and Cornwall, they could have been busts sitting in the same studio at Graham Ferry's place as Melbourne. Alright. So I'll talk about Graham Ferry. William Ferry was quite similar. He was the younger brother from Graham. There's about 15 years in between them. He also was a modeller at Linthorpe in England underneath Dresser. And you can see more of Dresser's influence through some of the glazed works that you see here. If you talk about art pottery, these are certainly art pottery. These are what they call their grotesques. They're made up really of, well, just straight out of the imagination. Whatever parts of different animals they would put together in such a way as to have this sort of interesting object. And Victorians were very much for this. Anything that was not frivolous but would excite their imagination. This is before radio and TV and all those sorts of things. So things like this on the mantelpiece would have got all sorts of enjoyment over years, from young kids up to older. They were made up from different parts of various animals, really. So you might have the head of a snake, wings of a bird, scales of a fish, anything like that at all.
They look like Chinese dragons,
well,
similar things.
Before Dresser came out, he spent years in Japan, and he just enthused by their art and culture there, and so he brought a lot of that back to England. And certainly in Linthorpe art pottery, you get various dragons which are really grotesque on some of their works too. So you can see how it's come from there, from Japan to England, via Dresser, and then back out here through the ferries and through to Sturrock. The centre one here, these are Sturrock's ones. So the two end ones have virtually got Ferry's grotesques and then Sturrock's ones. Sturrock's ones, they are finer detail. He's put more thought into them. They are a varied area of sort of animals and grotesques. Some of them he's duplicated. The one in the centre there you get without the bars on the back. So you could have bought that, we were discussing before, things called tapers, which you would light fires with, sort of long sticks like this, or get a light from the fire to light a cigarette or any sort of smoke at all. They could be placed in that as well as it being a vase. So we've got his, and then the very last cabinet, the yellow one, that's a Burman toss grotesque. So Ferry has gone from Linthorpe art pottery then to Burman toss. He was there for 14 years. He started off as a modeller and was in the end one of their major designers. So it is more than likely that he has designed the yellow one, and then when he's come to Melbourne, he's produced a sort of a similar one to Victoria art pottery. I think the difference between Ferry's works is that the commercial works, whatever was made had to be really well refined. They had people called fettlers. Once something was finished, they would go over it and remove any blemishes, any seam lines, anything like that to make it absolutely perfect, to reproduce it, to sell it. And that's what this yellow colour looks like. You look at Ferry's one, he's made that complete with any blemishes, left it in that state, and then got the mould maker, who I think was Sturrock, was to make a mould of that. So the subsequent moulds all show these imperfections if they were made just the first time off. And Ferry's animals almost look as if they can come alive. You know, it's hard to imagine. They're not sort of some sort of fictionalised thing that's just been drawn like a caricature. They have a bit more to them than that. So we've got Ferry's work in England, and then back out here. He comes out here about 1895, I think, starts the Victoria art pottery. I'm sure his brother, who had pottery works up the road for about 15 years before that, and said something to him like, you know, no one's making art pottery out here, why don't you come out and I'll help you along. The first time I came across it was completely by mistake. I was looking for information on Graham Ferry, and I went to the Metropolitan Board of Works maps, which are fabulous things, which I don't think anyone else much knew about then. But they drew plans of every building virtually in Melbourne in the 1890s. So all of a sudden you've got a fabulous streetscape of the buildings, kilns coming out, the sizes of the building, amazing stuff. And beside Graham Ferry's works, there was Cornwall's, and then there was W.M. Ferry. And I thought it was a typo. Just made a typo. And then by the time I went to the rates office and actually looked through them, I realised it was a different person. It was a Ferry, and all of a sudden these are two brothers coming out at different times, making slightly different sorts of wares. Right, this is what William Ferry really made most of his money from, jardiniers and pedestals. Again, if you look at some of Berbantoff's things, virtually identical pedestals. You would hardly know the difference at all. They're very smart. They are. Yeah, this one says, this doesn't say Berbantoff, but it has their mark, which is like a BMF or something, you know, together. All the Ferry ones are marked with the VAP or sometimes WF for William Ferry. The other interesting thing, the connection between these again, I don't know what I mentioned before, that the metal instruments that are used to mark the Ferry's things is the same implements that is used to mark his Sturrock items as well. So again, it's another connection that they must have all been together in the same sort of area, making things at the same time. And I think this is the way they probably would have sold them too. I think they would have sort of mixed and matched, depending, because the colour schemes were much the same. These very opaque, dark colours. And even if you look at some of these aren't so dissimilar to things made by Remude in the early 30s. And it's very odd, well, it's not odd, that Dave D, who was the potter who started Remude, he actually worked in Cornwall's, which was on the other side of the clay works, the clay hole, where these were being made early on. So I'm almost certain that he's thought to himself, what's selling in the Depression? I don't know. What's art pottery? And he's thinking back to William Ferry, 20 years before, and that's it. And I think he's used the similar sorts of colours in the very early Remude things, sort of to get started. So all these things are sort of interrelated, even though what we're talking about here is 19th century, and Remude and the like is more like the 1920s. And I suppose the other thing to say is that the art pottery that came subsequently was of a completely different nature to this.
What were they used for? I mean, these are ornaments that are on the mantelpiece type
Yeah.
thing. These here?
Oh, these are to take plants.
Oh, they're indoors.
Yeah, they're indoors. Yeah. Similar ones are made in terracotta, which we use for outside. But these were sort of big, impressive things. Well, in rooms like this, sort of either side of here or the middle place or here. Most of the Australian pottery is made something like this, but none of them really as varied as this. Or these are sort of artistic objects in their own right. That's what I keep sort of saying. There's a bit of a difference between this and the commercially made things, whether they're Bendigo or Lithgow or any of those sorts of places.
So the decoration, the relief decoration of it is through the mould rather than being added afterwards?
It's a combination. This one's completely been moulded, and so is that one. Yeah. So he has made, and on the front cover of the book, there's a picture of Ferry in his works with a vase, very similar to that red one, in front of him and doing some work on it. So he would have done an outline of the design. Colonial painters would do exactly the same thing. She'd go out and draw things, take them back, and then she'd transfer the drawing onto her pots and then shallow carve them. He would have done the same sort of thing. Some of the things you've got added bits, and I can show you as we go through. But that would have been, as I said, probably in 2 half moulds, and that's where Sturrock would come in.
Yeah, but also quite a lot of yarn is press molded in like
Oh,
yeah.
like your early
Yeah, they're not slip
flatbacks,
cards, it's a
big,
different
and if you
process.
ever break one of those, you get little fingerprints in it from kids with like slaves making those static flatbacks.
Yeah. So these are a lot thicker than the more modern sort of slip cast things. All right, we might as well just go to the second camera here. This is all Richard Sturrock's items. Now, he was virtually not known at all until Richard Berry, an antique dealer in Melbourne, came across one cache of his works, about 35 pieces. The story was that they came up for auction at Young's auction in Camberwell, about 1972, something like that, and I think it must have been a family member has died, and all of a sudden whatever was left from Richard Sturrock's works has just sort of gone to auction rooms. A lot of these things Richard Berry didn't have in his shop or didn't sell, but subsequently they were sold at Young's auction again, would you believe, about 7 or 8 years ago. So some of these I was able to buy then, which people didn't realise quite what they were, even though they had other ones which were Sturrock items in that one auction. So again, we've got some of his grotesques up the top there. This one's a candlestick. This is a spoon warmer, the same as that yellow one over there is, which was purely made to warm your very cold spoon as an etiquette of dining or fine dining in the late 19th century. We've got 2 smaller terracotta busts by Sturrock here, which also show his relationship, I think, to Graham Ferry. Graham Ferry did small busts as well, so it's strange that in the one person in Richard Sturrock you see William Ferry's things and Graham Ferry's things, and that seems to be the total of his sort of artistic licence, if you like, at these 2 different areas. We've got other strange things here. The elephant, which is missing a leg, is obviously no one's had the heart to throw out years ago, and I've had the same, I've had to keep it. The other, it hasn't been glazed. The other one, which is a sort of grotesque monster seated, had various parts fallen off, knocked off. He's not even been fired, so he's just like air dry, and it's been like that for 100 odd years now. But it shows such a great sort of area of competence that he had, and the fine work that he did on all of those. If you look at that elephant, on the sides of sort of the carrying part, the incised line work there is so similar to Ferry's pedestal over there. Again, you can see the 2 of them almost being side by side when they're being made. We have a very interesting candlestick there, almost the shape of something like a griffin, but what you would call is a grotesque. You see nothing like any of these things really in Australian pottery except for William Ferry's things. I mean, they're just so out there, they're just so different to anything before when those other people way up here. These 2 items here were also in the Sturrock estate group of things, and they were both broken in half. It was only perhaps 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that I realised what the heck they had been. But they are this sort of Victorian aesthetic of wanting novelty items, a bit like some of the grotesques. So they often would use Vesta matches, which would have been in the sort of the pale sections of these. And in the other section there would have been tapers, again as I said, from getting a light from the fire. Then because the Vesta matches are sort of so flammable, they've taken on a sort of a joking look at it. So to put them into what is a water pail, and the stump beside it has come from a water pump. So if they self-ignited, they would go out. And it seems ludicrous, but his thought was such an interesting idea. He's made 2 of these, and you do get them from England. You do get this sort of never out here. I've never seen an Australian-made one. It's like a smoker's companion, which is what you would call these. Below we've got salt glaze things. So all of this is earthenware or terracotta. If you fire very highly and another kiln, you can produce salt glazeware. Now, this is what your sewage pipes are made out of, some of the decoration on the rooftops. So it's very hard, and it's got this very, well, you have different shades of colour. But the interesting thing is, of course, it means that Sturrock has worked somewhere where they made terracotta, where they've done salt glazing, where they could also fire earthenware. And places like that in Victoria about in the 90s, it might be perhaps 2 or 3 in all of Melbourne. So again, it brings you back to the 3 of them all working virtually in in the one sort of area in Brunswick. This thing here is another interesting item. You do come across these, sometimes in a dark green. They're fence styles. They were used, or they were called the Belgian relief. So when Germany was invaded Belgium, the rest of the world sort of got together to try to get enough money to help them out. So there was all sorts of things going on, even in Australia, which they were trying to get money together for the Belgian relief, is what they called it. In 1950, at Graham Ferry's place, these were being produced. So these went around the country being sold. And that's yet another different sort of glaze. And this is like a very high-fine Rockingham glaze. So you've got salt glazing, terracotta, Rockingham and earthenware, which is a huge range of different sorts of ceramics to make in the one place. Richard Sturrock's work. Over here we have some William Ferry's things. Again, we've got a large shell, which is a similar size one in the front one. We've got some very small items. We've got a couple of things here that have been thrown. That very rarely you come across wheel-thrown pots from Ferry's place, but they're certainly two examples. So he must have had someone else come in and do the throwing, so I'm sure he wouldn't have been capable of doing that. We were talking about pieces of work that have been added. This vase over here has had the handles put on and little sort of masked faces sprigged on the side. Were you talking about the sprigging before?
That was sprig molding.
No. The applied pieces.
Press molding.
Oh, right. Well, so this whole entire thing has been press moulded. There's been a mould just in the shape of the vase, so you'd have a slab of clay pressed into one half and the other half and put together. After that has happened, they've had special little sprig moulds, say the handle, which they would pull out and put on. Then they'd have sprig moulds and little masks, little faces, and that also would have been taken out of the mould and applied onto that vase and then glazed after all that. So there's two or three sort of different ways of making pottery, just shown on that. This is probably the best example I've seen of what you would call a large floor vase. I doubt whether it would have been used as such, but it might have had pampas grass or something like that, some sort of large flowering thing. Even in the 20s they went into sprays of gumworts. I could almost see branches of gums coming out of that. Although this might be a bit early for that, sort of in the 1890s. More jardiniers, a variety of sizes. This one with 3 little feet on it, so it could have been used anywhere really, on a table or on the floor. You don't often see that. The little feet would have been applied separately to the rest of it. Over here we have a few more of the pedestals of jardiniers. This one actually came from the Ferry family. It was part of some of these other terracotta things that were stolen from the garden. This one, the whole base that was broken off was missing. So I've had that restored, so at least we've got something from his, well, we know they're all from his hand, but this is actually one of the ones he took home. And interesting enough, there's quite a lean on it. I've sort of evened it up a bit when I put the base on it, but I'm sure it was too bad to sell, and that's the reason why. So because he didn't sell it, he's taken it home and said, oh, well, that'll be one for us.
As you do.
Yeah, it's a certain human nature in that which we all sort of relate to. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know they had this. These pictures of Graham and William here. It's Graham as an older man. I've put these in since I've seen them. So typical sort of Victorian gentleman, large family. There probably would have been at least 12, I think, in the family. About 3/4 of them and the mother all came out here in sort of the 1890s in a couple of different stages. Very talented family. 3 of the sisters worked in the potteries, doing decoration, doing fine handwork, and they shifted with them at different pottery works. Another one of the Bergen family was a well-known tenor, appeared in opera and throughout Melbourne. So sort of a multi-talented Victorian family that you hear about. Okay, at the end of this cave, we've got another large shell, which is a fabulous thing. We've got a smaller shell here, which we're not quite sure of. It was sold at the very thing, so it's probably come from the Stoic estate. The ones behind it are William Ferry's work. But I've also seen that shell in Cornwall's thing. So again, there's another connection to his earliest work. So it could well be that he's made the shells there Sturrock's made them here and Ferry's made them all there all during the same time. This is quite hi-fi though. This is like the style. It'd be interesting to put the two together, which I haven't done before. That's a hi-fi sort of Rottingham, and so as this seems to be. Again, a different object to the rest of them. These three vases, or one's a jar in here, I've always, to look at them you'll think that they look like Ferry's work, but they're just different enough not to be his. None of them, I've never seen any that have been signed. There's only about 3 different shapes like this, and the glazes are usually almost just these couple of combinations. But after looking at them a lot, I've found some of the decoration on this. Some of the decoration on this jardiniere here is on one of the other vases there, but it's more in relief. And the same with a series of sort of 3 or 4 dots that he would put around them. The glazes are more like some of Sturrock's things. So the greens on this is like some of the Sturrock grotesques over there. And it's a different clay base. So I think the colours are just slightly different because of different clay. And it was probably the first things he made when he came to Melbourne. This one is numbered number 1, and I think 10 and 11. So I think that's probably the way it fits in. When he's first coming here in 1895, he's made these to see how things go. He hasn't signed them, he's just put numbers on them, 1, 10 and 11, and seen how they've gone. And then he's progressed to all these other ones that are usually well marked with his name. So I think we can definitely say these things, which almost sort of look alike, are definitely his work. You'll notice the carving is quite shallow, whereas all the later ones, like all these down there, it's very deep. So I think that's something else he started doing, and then for some reason, perhaps with the new clay body, he's made the carving much sort of deeper. So it becomes a different object altogether. So these are, you still sort of see these around, but this is their rightful place. Did I put that down? Actually, no. This is probably, I think I know of 2 Javanese and pedestals which are matching, which have been sold that way. This is one. The other one is from the Ferry family, which had a jardiniere which had the same pattern as this on the top, whereas this pattern, well, it doesn't look like it, but it's a different pattern altogether. And there's one of them over there, a different sort of colour. So he's obviously sold them like this, but he's also sold them like this too. I think the jardiniers have just been matched because of the colour schemes have been much the same. These are nearly all well marked, and initially when I first sort of found these things, if something was marked Victoria art pottery, it was just taken for granted that really it was Staffordshire or English or something like that, certainly nothing to do with Australia. Which is the case with a lot of things. There's another pottery in Richmond called the Staffordshire pottery. I think a lot of things have gone underneath the guard. People haven't noticed them purely because the name sort of sounds English. And looking at that, you would just think it's sort of high-grade majolica, which is made from the UK.
Graham, wouldn't it also been at the time to make it look like the English stuff would sell better than if you put Australian type stuff on it?
Well, he never actually put the word Australian. No, so even his title of the pottery works, Victoria Art Pottery, Victoria doesn't necessarily...
But even like the James Campbell, that they always had lines on their filters, they didn't have a kangaroo on it, because you sell the line and it's a kangaroo.
And that's obviously why they didn't sort of mark it. And there's always that prejudice against Australian-made goods, which still happens to today. You still see the same sort of thing going on there. They buy Australian rather than imports. And a lot of this stuff, I think, was killed off by the Japanese about 1900 when they started reproducing English wares and selling them out there. Not 1930s and then 1900, but I'm talking about. So there's a continual history of sort of doing the death of the local industries from imports.
You mean like the Awaji wares?
That's a different story again, because these things are very sort of simple objects with just 2 or 3 splatters of colour usually, and initially people used to think they might have been Australian because they sort of look a bit like Australian, but they're not. They come from another culture altogether. But because none of them are marked, it all makes it very difficult to try to distinguish which made. And even now you see such things in auction rooms put up as Australian property. I think that concludes. You've been talking, hearing me talk for ages. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Greg.
And I hope you've enjoyed this time. And well, it should be an eye-opener for some of these things.